If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come, bring my spirits up. There's some shit I like to fix, but I still know that I'm blessed.
Let's get an update from the experts now that we're this far into the trial and see what they have to say. We're going to hear some inaccuracies. I'll make a few commentaries in between, maybe just put some corrections on the screen. We already know that the mainstream media isn't covering this very well. So let's head into the expert opinion.
Finally, we turn to Salinas, California. The murder trial continues for Paul Flores, accused of the 1996 murder of Cal Poly Pomona freshman Kristin Smart.
Alrighty then, we're 10 seconds in and they have the wrong school. It was not Pomona, it was San Luis Obispo, and this is very, very common knowledge. So that's right up there with the one that had her name Christine instead of Kristen. Come on, guys, you can do better.
The prosecution concluded their case by presenting two witnesses that claimed they were sexually assaulted by Paul Flores on separate occasions in 2008 and 2011. As they rested their case, the state presented an explicit photo of a woman with a red ball gag in her mouth on Paul Flores' bed. The image was a screenshot allegedly taken from a video on Paul's computer.
All of us following the trial know about the disgusting things found on the computer. And if you haven't seen it already, I have the episode of the actual search warrant information that goes even beyond what was brought into court. So be sure to watch that. By the way, extreme trigger warning on that episode.
The defense began their case with testimony from a doctor specializing in decomposition of the body and continued with a forensics expert trying to poke holes in the prosecution's case in which there is no body.
This attorney will now go on to explain some of the rules in court, but it ends up he's in a different state, so realize there's going to be some clarification how this all applies to California after the fact. I guess he didn't think to look at the rules of the state he was going to have an interview for. Interesting.
There are rules of evidence that permit prosecutors to seek, in certain cases, the use of what we call other acts or similar acts evidence. And that is how prosecutors have traditionally attempted to prove cases where there are reluctant victims, where there are no eyewitnesses, there's a lack of forensic evidence, there's an eyewitness that they're trying to corroborate. And essentially what they do is they have little direct evidence of the accused committing this particular crime. But what they do is they try to bolster it from the sides, and they try to bolster it from underneath with other evidence of other crimes.
Yes, why should you be a habitual criminal and not have that be exposed in court, putting other people in danger?
And of course it's prejudicial to make the jurors think that the accused is someone who's done it in the past and therefore has done it in this case, which the jurors are told not to think about. They're not allowed to use propensity evidence. But the way the rules are traditionally written, the prosecutor...
See the guy on the left squirming because he knows it's not quite accurate information. You can tell by his face.
Prosecutors are allowed to use other acts, and they're allowed to use other acts to prove things like intent, motive, scheme, modus operandi.
Get ready, guys. He's going to talk about a case that none of us want to think about. Ugh.
Let me give you one very common example where this failed, which we all saw, was in the O.J. Simpson case. We saw the prosecutors attempt to lead into their case with other acts evidence. Nicole Brown Simpson was clearly murdered.
Man, that verdict watch and that verdict coming down is a day I'll never forget. That and Casey Anthony.
Domestic violence calls and 911 calls and a note that she left in a picture and a note that she left in a safety deposit box saying that, showing what she looked like and almost like she's speaking from the grave. And so the prosecution brought in other acts to try to show that he was capable of or had done this in the past or had done things, again, not for propensity purposes, but to show that he was someone who this was his modus operandi. And in this case, they don't have a body. And the only DNA evidence they have, as I understand it, is, well, it's not even DNA. They have some evidence of what may be decomposed blood in the dirt beneath a ramp and a porch. Even though they don't have a body. Somebody believed that they were together. They have something in the dirt, and she was kidnapped. And these other cases corroborate. He admitted that he had kidnapped her. He had his fun with her, I believe was the phrase he had used, and he got rid of her. And so they're trying to show that this woman, the witness, was in a position to, one, that she had been kidnapped by him. The two, her story about having been kidnapped and sexually assaulted was corroborated by this photograph. And three, that this was his MO, so to speak, that he kidnapped women, sexually abused them, and then got rid of them afterwards. The challenge with that theory, Josh, as you know, is that there isn't any real corroboration for that specifically. And the two women who claimed to have been kidnapped and raped by him, apparently, according to them, he dropped off when he didn't kill them. He dropped them off and took them home.
Actually, testimony was that one drove herself there and left in her own car in the morning. One walked from the bar while he walked his bike along with, and then he did give her a ride home. And the third person we don't know. So that was a bit of a generalization.
From a human tragedy standpoint, they're horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible that we have to have this conversation about someone's child.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Now they're going to clarify how this applies to California law.
And I just kind of wanted to add to that. In California, the law actually changed. In cases involving either domestic violence or sexual assault, they can bring in these other uncharged acts to specifically prove propensity. And the prosecution can make that argument that this person has done it before, therefore you can use that to conclude they have the propensity, the likelihood to have committed the crime that we are now presenting to you and asking you to convict that person on.
We've heard Dr. Phil say it over and over again. A good predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Duh.
Incredibly powerful tool for the prosecution. That law changed in response to a case. What case was that?
Seems as if what often happens, that a tragedy has to happen before laws are enacted that make much more sense.
You brought it up. The O.J. Simpson case, where the prosecution was not allowed to make those types of arguments. The legislative response to that was that this is so unacceptable that we cannot allow people who commit domestic violence or sexual assault to not make that argument that they are kind of have a propensity towards that type of behavior. And so since that time, the law's changed in California, and it's become an incredibly powerful tool for the prosecution.
Oh my gosh, thank goodness. Can you imagine if none of that was able to come in to trial?
Let's get back to Paul Flores.
Make this observation. I think it's really difficult for defendants and defense lawyers in these cases to find those that are willing to come forward and testify for the defense, because the state almost in many ways has a monopoly on the crime lab and on resources and funding.
Well, that gives us some insight into why, in my opinion, Singer had such cruddy, outdated, non-related experience. Experts dealing with rats and pigs and not humans and haven't worked since 2003 and all that.
No body murder cases are very tough. They're very, very, very difficult. I think in a no body murder case where there's any doubt about the forensic evidence and any doubt about the reliability of the witnesses, no matter how heinous and horrible the case, the act is, how heartbroken the victims are for the loss and the absence of Kristin Smart. Boy, I hate to see somebody convicted in a case like that. I really do. It is hard to advocate for people when there are people who sit there and they want justice. Well, justice is the right result. Vengeance is different than justice. Vengeance is different than getting the right result in court. And sometimes the right result is one that doesn't make you feel like this has been solved. I think jurors, in my experience, have had a tendency in cases like this to lean with the state because they're almost in some ways afraid to not. But we'll see.
I'll tell you though, putting aside these last two witnesses that they called that talked about their interactions with Paul Flores, I think that's devastating stuff to his case. But to me, a turning point in this whole thing, and we'll see how it turns out, but to me, a turning point was when they played or they presented evidence of wiretaps from the phone calls that Paul had with his mother, and they're talking about this podcast.
By the way, you can find this program on YouTube. It's called True Crime Daily. I love the episodes with Anna Garcia. She's amazing. And then this one, the segment is the sidebar from that channel. So check it out, especially with, I know we're all into crime and trials. So if you don't know about that show, I do recommend it. And thanks for your input, guys.
If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just be love and watch the smiles come.
Thanks for
Bring
watching.
my spirits up.
Don't forget to stop and smell the flowers.
There's some shit I like to fix, but I still